Welcome back, peers and practitioners. Today, we're diving into a rigorous explainer of Chapter 23 of Nāgārjuna's Mūlamadhyamakakārikā. And let me tell you, in this explainer, we are going to be deconstructing some of the absolute most stubborn, deeply ingrained final dualities on the path. We're talking about the apparent divide between right and wrong, and even between wisdom and ignorance. It's a chapter that literally attacks the very foundation of why we practice. So let's just jump right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. The triad of impurities, 2. Applying the tetralemma, 3. Emptiness and interdependence, 4. Illusions and generalized tetralemma, 5. The middle way approach, and finally, 6. Beyond all dualities.
But before we can dismantle anything, we really need to strictly define our Abhidharma target. We're talking about viparyasa, the cognitive errors, or you could say perversions. This is that fundamental misperception we all have where we attribute inherent existence, permanence, purity, or happiness to phenomena that are, in reality, entirely empty. Now, in traditional frameworks, these cognitive errors serve as the absolute root cause of our kleśas, our defilements.
Section 1. The triad of impurities.
Now, notice the stark, uncompromising contrast here. The traditional Abhidharma view treats defilements as real, momentary entities that are locked within a strict causal chain. And because they're seen as real, well, they naturally require a forceful, gradual purification process to uproot. But Nāgārjuna radically reframes this entire concept. The Madhyamaka view posits that these kleśas are inherently empty. They're mere conventional designations lacking any independent essence or svabhāva whatsoever, meaning there's actually nothing real to be purified. The crucial point to grasp is this classic triad of impurities sitting right at the very top of the wheel of dependent origination. Step 1. The causes, which are our perverted errors regarding what is salutary, like virtues, and unsalutary, like non-virtues. Step 2 is the causality or production phase itself. And Step 3 is the effect, the resulting impurities such as passionate attraction or intense aversion. Nāgārjuna is about to systematically, point by point, collapse this entire three-sphere model.
Section 2. Applying the tetralemma.
This matrix brilliantly illustrates the exhaustive logical breakdown. If we map the tetralemma against these three spheres, testing if they are existent, non-existent, both, or neither, or maybe they're different, identical, both, or neither, separate, united, both, or neither, multiple, one, both, or neither, permanent, impermanent, both, or neither, continuous, discontinuous, both, or neither, eternal, annihilated, both, or neither, self-existent, other-existent, both, or neither, dependent, independent, both or neither, empty, non-empty, both or neither? Well, we quickly see that every single extreme position leads inevitably to contradiction and absurdity. You literally cannot logically locate the defilement in the person, outside the person, in both or in neither. The triad simply cannot hold up to ultimate analysis. It falls apart.
And this brings us to a really uncomfortable rhetorical inquiry that Nāgārjuna forces us to face regarding the very foundation of our impurities. If the object of our desire, the attractive, and the object of our hatred, the unpleasant, do not possess intrinsic being, how on earth can the resulting desire or aversion have any real substance? Let's look exactly at how Nāgārjuna strips this down in verses 10 through 12. The salutary and non-salutary are entirely mutually dependent. A thing is only ever pleasant in relation to something unpleasant. Because they are strictly co-defined and co-emergent, neither exists independently. And if the pleasant object doesn't inherently exist on its own side, your desire for it is equally baseless.
Section 3. Emptiness and interdependence. We are dealing with an incredibly powerful tautological emphasis here, what we can call the emptiness to emptiness loop. Now, in earlier chapters, we relied pretty heavily on dependent origination to prove emptiness, but here, Nāgārjuna uses a reflexive loop. Because the cause, which is the cognitive error, lacks intrinsic nature, the resulting effect, the impurity, absolutely must also lack intrinsic nature, and vice versa. They empty each other out completely, proving there is no real opposition or relation between opposites.
As Nāgārjuna states right in the opening verses, there is no real opposition or relation between opposites because the entire sphere of causality is just empty. Things derived from mental fabrications and errors simply do not exist by their own nature. Therefore, the impurities do not exist in absolute reality. It's that simple, yet that profound.
And this establishes the union of the two truths regarding the three spheres. The causes, the causality, and the impurities are inseparable.
They're dependently co-originated, interdependent, co-defined, co-emergent, co-evolving, and co-imputed by the mind. They operate as mere designations and conventional tools. We can and should acknowledge them as relatively useful conventions for navigating daily life, but we absolutely must realize they are never, ever absolute.
Section 4, Illusions and Generalized Tetralemma. According to verses 7 and 8, these bases of our defilements are not even real entities. The sixfold substances, form, sound, taste, touch, smell, and mental objects are entirely illusory. They are like a fairy castle, an echo, a mirage, or a dream. Sure, they appear to us, but they lack all absolute substance. They're there, yet not there. The entire triad of cause, condition, and defilement is basically an illusion co-imputed by the mind. And think about it. If the basis of the error is merely a mirage, who exactly is the one erring? How can an illusory person possess an illusory defilement? It's mind-bending. Now we apply the generalized tetralemma, and this really drops the hammer on all of our conceptual models, triads and dyads entirely. Reality is not eternal, not non-eternal, not both, and not neither. It's not with self, not without self, not both, and not neither. Whatever this is, reality is not this, not non-this, not both, and not neither. And guess what? There is no fifth option. It is utterly, entirely beyond all conditioned, dualistic, conceptual proliferation.
Section 5, the middle way approach.
So, how do we handle this? The best attitude is the middle way, which is completely free from the extremes of grasping at this or non-this, or even the middle positions of both and neither. We have to avoid reification. We cannot grasp conventional tools like purification or defilement as absolute realities requiring forceful, grinding effort. Instead, the middle way invites us to use these triads conventionally, without attachment, reification, absolutes, or straining effort, fully knowing their true, empty, illusory nature.
Nāgārjuna seals this paradox perfectly in verse 24. If defilements were actually real, self-existent entities, they would be permanent and could never ever be changed or eliminated. Conversely, if they are already empty of inherent existence, well, there's nothing substantial to eliminate in the first place. The very act of striving to eliminate a real impurity just reinforces the ignorance that created it.
Section 6, beyond all dualities.
Because the entire wheel of dependent origination and all the triads within it are illusory, it means we have to transcend the final, most subtle dualistic frameworks that we as practitioners cling to: right versus wrong, pure versus impure, samsara versus nirvana, and ordinary being versus Buddha. Astonishingly, even the duality between ignorance and wisdom must be transcended, because they mutually define one another and are therefore equally empty.
The massive takeaway here? There is nothing to accept, reject, or purify in absolute terms. There is no inherent impure ignorance sitting inside you waiting to be forcefully transmuted into pure wisdom. Reality is completely beyond all dualities, triads, models, maps, and conditioned dualistic conceptual proliferation. We might as well perceive everything as primordially equal, pure, perfect, complete, one, and divine, because all phenomena are already resting exactly as they are.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought for this explainer. If the entire wheel of dependent origination is a useful conventional model, but not reality as it is, and if reality is entirely beyond all maps and dualities, what does it truly mean for you today to simply abide in reality exactly as it is, in pure suchness? Take some time to really think about how that shifts and ultimately transforms the very nature of your practice.